Hi, Greg. How are you?
Good, and you?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us. We are busy running a mental health campaign called My Mind, My Health.
Hi, I'm Emma Jane. I'm from Cape Town. I'm almost 30 years old, and I'm a digital marketing manager of an ad agency here in Woodstock. I was 15 and I went to a psychiatrist's office for the first time, and she told me that I had borderline personality disorder, and I was heavily medicated from 15, which I mean most people aren't even formed in their identity yet. And after that I went through about 12 years of just radical pain, a lot of tablets, and actually learned how to process emotions and find freedom. And so just to advocate for people that actually don't understand that, or live under a title, or live under stress and anxiety for most of their life without being able to cope with it. So for me, that's why I'm passionate about it, because it's definitely a personal struggle that I've had to go through. Basically under the umbrella of not having an identity. And so we do splitting, which is when you're in one place and not another, or you dissociate from reality. You have erratic mood swings. You have anger is not anger, it's rage. Happiness is not happiness, it's ecstaticness, which is like not good, it's erratic. And when you're sad, you're suicidal. So you also have many different side effects of that, like substance abuse, which is a huge symptom for most people. You have no coping mechanism, so everything feels exceptionally real, and it feels way more than it actually is. So it's an emotional regulation disorder. It's not necessarily chemical. So it's not like bipolar type 2 or type 1, which is treatable with medication. It's very much something that is actually learned through handling symptoms and handling emotions. Yeah, it was. So my parents were getting divorced, and it was quite an intense, chaotic environment at the time. And I think they put me in a psychiatrist's office because they wanted to feel safe about the decisions that they were making, and to make sure that I was okay during the process. Unfortunately, I already at this point had a lot of stunted emotions. I was in a relationship from a very young age for about 4 years, and in that time had experienced a lot of traumatic events and just heartache, and I had acting out behaviors, as we call them, where I'd hurt people and I'd cheated, and I was very young to be doing the things that I was doing. I was also drinking excessively at that time, so it made sense for them to put me into a psychiatrist. But I didn't think I'd come out with a label. But I will tell you that when she told me that label and she gave me that medication, it actually felt like I could understand and identify what was wrong with me, because I knew something inside wasn't okay. But I didn't have words to explain or labels to put over it. So actually, at that time, it suited me, because then borderline became my new identity. At the time, I definitely think it was a relief, because I had a label to kind of, say, well, I didn't mean it, it's just my borderline. Which obviously led to it being the worst thing that ever happened to me, because the moment that I could then blame everything on that disorder meant that I could get away with whatever I wanted. And everyone around me felt sorry for me because I couldn't help it, because it was inherently in me. So ultimately it led to a lot of destruction. Because it didn't get better after I got labeled, it got a hell of a lot worse. So, after I left school, I'd already been medicated for a long time, in therapy for a long time. I then found drugs and, went on down that spiral, and was in and out of rehab for 8 times throughout a period of 5 years. So it led to a lot more terrible things than it did good. So in 2016, at that point, I was on 19 psychiatric tablets a day, and I was having exceptionally bad nightmares and would wake up having full terrors. One day, I'd made another mistake. I was actually dating girls for that period of my life as well, and I got into a really dramatic situation with 4 of them. 2 of them were my ex-girlfriends, and to put a very long story short, I woke up the one day and I was like, I am done, and I just don't want to do this. But I was so heavily dissociated from my body and detached from what was really going on around me that I just planned, and I went and took all my medication for 6 months, and that's some really, Schedule 5 stuff, 6 months worth of Schedule 5 tablets and 19 different types of them. And I put my pajamas on and I wrote in highlighter on a notes pad saying, "I'm sorry, I love you." And I lay down and I just went to sleep. And honestly, by the grace of God, I did not die. I had, in my being out of state, I literally sent a message and I'd said oxygenated. Within a few minutes, my whole family was there, and I blacked out and went to an ambulance and woke up a day later in ICU with my dad next to me crying. And that was the turning point for me in a big way. And then that led to the rest of my, the next 5 years of my life, which was a huge transformation. After that incident, I went back into treatment for 8 months. And while I was there, I just realized that it actually had to change, and in order for it to change, little things had to change. And I think it was the little things for me. But this also led to me having a huge transition into the faith, into where I met the Lord and where my whole life really changed, which is a whole defining moment on its own. But yeah, so I think definitely that month was just honestly about waking up and saying, okay, well, inherently something's wrong. I'm not okay. How do I make those changes? What do I need to do in the morning? What do I need to do in the evening? What do I need to do in the afternoon? What do I need to do before I go to bed to make sure that I want to wake up and actually get through the rest of the next day? And a slogan that really, got me was just one more time. Like, just one more time. You got to push through just one more time. And that kind of sees you through. You get enough just one more times, and you've got a year behind you since the incident. But yeah, I think that all led to the next part of my journey, which was my step into my religion. I had a really radical spiritual experience, and within one evening I was off all my medication, and it's been 6 years, and I haven't been on any psychiatric medication whatsoever. I've also never been back in an institution. I've also never had suicidal tendencies again. I have had no night terrors, and life really just completely changed for me, all in one day. My story does sound different to most because of that change on that day that I had. That didn't mean that just because the relief of the feelings were there, it didn't mean that I didn't have to do things in order to, stay on a path or to keep my head clear. So for me, it was really much just trying to be present. I think one of my biggest problems, and I think a lot of us who have anxiety feel these things of, it's thinking about the future, it's thinking about what's next, it's thinking about, have I done the right thing? Or it's thinking about, oh, what did I just say? Like, I should never have said that. It's either dwindling on the past or it's dwindling on the future, and then you're never actually here. So one of my biggest lessons that I had to learn was how to become mindful. So mindfulness became quite a big part of my life. I remember getting this exercise where I had to take a raisin from a whole bag of raisins, and I had to close my eyes, and I had to feel the raisin, and I had to smell the raisin, and I had to see the raisin, and I had to taste the raisin, and I had to be able to identify. I had to be so mindful in that moment that if I could look at that entire bag, I would know exactly which raisin was my raisin. And I basically started doing that in many activities in my life, like brushing my teeth, doing my hair, whatever it looked like, was just trying to be present. Obviously my faith played a really big part, so worship music and reading the Bible, as well as getting a community around me of like-minded people, and also trying not to fall into the victim role again. I got very used to falling into the, I can't help it, it's just me, it's just the way I was born, it's just, it's a disorder, there's nothing I can do about it. I actually had to start owning and becoming very active in my decisions to own what I was doing wrong, accepting responsibility, making amends, changing direction, changing tone. How was I interacting with people? It is a lot of things, but I would say for me, those are the solid top 5. But I had to become really proactive, which I wasn't used to. I'm huge on love everyone no matter the cost. But again, that's, it depends what that relationship looks like. Is it something that's completely draining and clearing out your bank account? Then boundaries and everything come into play. But in the larger picture, I think when you love people well enough, and love can look like a lot of things. It can look like boundaries, and it can look like not enabling someone to continue. But I think above all else, to make sure you love someone well. And if that means, if that person, I have a friend right now, for example, who is completely suicidal and who gets completely debilitated during the day to the point where she'll sit outside in a shopping, like a parking lot, and she'll sit there for 3 hours and she won't be able to move because her feelings are so intense for her. I will never give up on that girl, like, you know, and I will never not offer my love to her, and I'll never not offer my help to her. I'll never just not offer a text to her. And I think for me, I needed that same thing. I'm not saying it's always the best way to go, please don't get me wrong, but I do think that for me, love above all else is everything. I actually started a blog called Moments of the Mind, which is still out there on the internet. It's just not on social media anymore, but if you look it up, you can still read some of the very distorted writing. And that was really where my whole journey started, because I knew that even though I was sick, I knew that I wanted to help people not feel like me. So I started writing really authentic and vulnerable blogs, which were really revealing, and it got traction because people didn't write about this kind of stuff back then. So we released a podcast, but I just wasn't in the mental space to, you know, upkeep that. And so that took that went on for about 3 years, and then it just kind of just sat on Instagram for a while. And then while I spent the last 2 years in California, and while I was there, I started dreaming and visioning this whole new project, which was developed in 2020, just before COVID hit. It's called Movement 838, which is it's after a Bible verse, Romans 8:38. Nothing can separate you from the love of God. And so for me, it was all about never giving up on love. And so it was originally supposed to be a retreat-based ministry for people who had anxiety or depression, suicidal idealization, alcoholism, addiction in any form, sexual, pornographic, drugs, whatever. And unfortunately, COVID hit, and so retreats were off the table. So we learned how to make an online platform. So I have a lot of my team in America. I also have 2 people here, and we counsel. So we have a few clients from all over Africa, and we counsel them and, you know, pray with them, and we're here for them. We're basically glorified emotional support systems for now. And we just speak vulnerably, and we speak the truth. That is still going to become a solid place. I can't give too much detail, but soon enough there'll be an actual venue, which will be really exciting. But before then, for now, the page is just wholeness and freedom, and it's learning about how to find that in every part of your life, whether it's your diet, because we don't think and talk about the things like nutrition that actually change our neural pathways, and hydration and sleep and, you know, relationships. And it's very vulnerable, it's very raw, it's very real, and it's just following that journey. And I use myself as the person to illustrate that so that it's more relatable and for people to actually see that it's very human. Yeah. Movement838.com, which on Instagram will be wholeness_and_freedom. And then I'm Emma Truter. Yeah, so you can definitely find out more about it. If you can't make it through today, you can make it through the next 5 minutes only. Just keep compounding those 5 minutes, and just know that there's people out there that would do anything to make sure that you don't die. Like that you don't want to die, that, you know, that this stops for you, that anxiety is not something that runs your life, that suicidal idealization is not something that you think about when you wake up in the morning. I want people to actually feel the real love of life, and so just one more time, because you are worth it, and you'll find someone that thinks that even if you don't have anyone now.
Awesome stuff.
Thanks.
Emma, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. Thank you. Just one more time. You are really important, and you are really worthy, and there is someone out there that thinks that. So until you find that, just one more time, even if it's just 5 minutes at a time.